Hi, everyone. It's Tara with Be Light Transformative Therapy. And today we are trying something different once again. You can probably tell from the background here and also my mic setup. So, the last couple of weeks, I've been super stressed and feeling a lot of anxiety. And this past weekend on Saturday, I had a mini emotional breakdown, and I probably spent a good amount of Saturday crying in a ball. So, you can probably actually see my eyes are still pretty swollen, still pretty puffy. So the bottom line is I'm pretty behind on my production schedule, but I made a promise to myself several months ago that no matter what was happening in my life, no matter what came up for me, that I was going to be really diligent and disciplined about releasing one video on Tuesday and one video on Friday on my YouTube channel. So to try to facilitate that and stay true to that promise to myself, I thought that maybe I could try this setup where I don't have to set up my big lights or my main microphone, and I could just kind of talk casually to the camera. This would take so much more stress out of my life if I could just have these casual, one-on-one, more intimate video experiences with you once in a while. And I thought we could use this as a real-time teaching moment. So what happens when your teachers, your coaches, your therapists are themselves going through these life crises, right? What happens when your breath coach in this case is going through a health crisis or a financial crisis or an emotional crisis? Is she just all talk all the time, handing us breath tips, telling us how to breathe, telling us how powerful changing your breath can be? Or does she actually take action in her own life and practice what she preaches? So I thought we could spend the day really talking about, okay, I had this little mini meltdown this weekend. What exactly did I do in my own life for my own self-care to help me navigate through that and get to the other side and find my balance again and get my footing so that I can really start to move forward and get back into being productive and being focused and working toward my passion. So if that sounds good to you, stick around and we'll talk it through a little bit. Okay, so what does happen when your teacher or your coach or your therapist is really going through it? What is their process? Or in this case, what was my process? I thought it might be helpful to kind of talk you guys through it and see where you can relate. Maybe you're doing similar things for your own self-care practice, or maybe we'll start to brainstorm new ideas about how to navigate through to the other side. So step one, when I'm in that really emotional crisis place, what do I do for myself? Step one is I let myself completely fall apart. And I'm serious, I really do. I allow all the tears to come up to the surface. I let all those emotions come up to the surface. Because for me, I've learned over the years, it's way better to get those out than it is to hold them in. And if I'm totally honest with you, I also will take some time to indulge for a few moments in a fair amount of self-pity. I might even play the victim momentarily. I really let myself just get down and feel bad for myself. And then even in those moments, I'll even start to allow all the old stories to surface. And when those old stories surface, I'll even take some time to acknowledge them, really realizing that those are the stories I've been telling myself for my entire life. And that those stories I've been telling myself are partially responsible for what I'm feeling in this moment, for all these feelings that are coming to the surface in this moment. And I'll really take a moment, even though I'm crumbling and falling apart and the world around me seems like it's in chaos, I'll really take a moment to recognize those stories and really have a sense of, oh, wow, I've really been creating this perception for myself for so long. And then part of step one, when I'm crumbled in a ball on the floor in tears, is also to take a moment shamelessly to just blame other people for my problems. And I'll really just blame other people for my shortcomings, my failures in life. What did my mother do when I was younger? What didn't she do? Who's taking too much of my attention nowadays? Who are my biggest distractions? Why do I keep allowing people into my life who distract me from my goals? And on and on and on. And I let it come out. Now, be aware during this step one process, this indulgence in self-pity and blaming other people and not taking responsibility, this is not the solution, right? This is the transition phase. I like to think of it as a transition phase. And it's just to get it out of your system, because leaving it in there is inevitably going to make things much worse. So I really indulge in that process and I go through it. But then, then I remind myself, and I try to have the presence of mind to say these words out loud in a very powerful way, that I am responsible for my own feelings. This is no one else's fault, that I'm responsible for my own life, and to not give my power away like that, right? Tara, you are not a victim. Do not give your power away like that. You are responsible for your own life. And I'll actually say those sentences out loud to myself so that I can hear them and I can start to internalize them and start to shift a little bit what I'm thinking, what I'm believing, and what I am feeling. So then I also have to go back to all these stories now, all of these emotions that have come to the surface, and really ask myself, are these stories I've been telling myself all these years really true? Do I still believe them? And if I don't believe them, then why am I still allowing them to run my life? Why am I back here on the floor in a ball, crying, allowing these stories to surface and still letting them control my life? Why do I still see them as my reality? So really starting to question it. And then I might even have a moment of realization of, oh, I don't believe those stories anymore. But what I do believe is that anyone can change their life in any moment with the right mindset and the right action steps. And I truly do believe that. And maybe that sounds a little cliche to some of you, but for me, that's a powerful belief that I've had to craft over the last several years. And it has been something that helps to propel me forward. So I keep reminding myself and I keep saying out loud something to the effect of, everything can change in a moment. Everything can change in a moment. And I start talking myself back into this present moment, this present space, this present time, getting out of the past, because that's useless to live back there, and really getting back into my body in this present moment. And so that sentence might not be the one that does it for you, right? You might have to find your own phrase that really starts to bring you back into this present moment, back into your body. But for me, a sentence that really helps me is, everything can change in a moment. Okay, so now what is step 2 then? Step 2 is starting to ask myself, what do I need in this moment? I'm in this super weird space now. I've been crying for a really long time. I feel totally exhausted. I've got all these old memories and all these old stories running around, and I don't want to stay in this place. I don't want to be in this particular space. So now I have to ask myself, right? In my case, I've been a holistic practitioner for almost 20 years. I have a lot of tools in my tool belt. So I have to actually ask myself, what are the tools that I can use right now to create some type of state change that can shift either my external environment, my internal environment, or both? So what are some tools that we all have, right? Because so many of the self-care tools that we have access to are completely free and completely accessible at all times. Well, one thing we can do is go for a walk, right? It's huge to get outside, to breathe in the fresh air, to change the external environment, to change your vantage point, to change your perception, and to also gently start to move your body. We can do any type of movement, right? Movement changes the energy. We can shake, we can bounce, we can do some sort of asana practice or a Tai Chi practice. We can hit a heavy bag, we can lift weights, we can go for a run. Whatever it is for you, movement changes everything. We can breathe, my favorite, right? Breath is movement. It moves us from the inside. It massages us internally. So what do I use personally for my breath practice when I'm in a state like this? I know you all want to know, what does Tara do herself? She talks a lot, but what does her actual practice look like? So for me, I have a lot of different breath practices that I use, but what I default to when I'm really in that crisis mode is I like slow breathing. I like extra slow breathing. And I also like really strong breath holds. So holding my breath as long as I can. And I also like to, my background is in manual therapy more, and I'm a very physical person. I like to touch and mobilize things. I'll actually really get my hands underneath my rib cage and really start to mobilize my diaphragm a lot when I'm doing my breath practices on my own. And if that is interesting to you guys, let me know, because maybe I'll start to make some videos about how I really address my diaphragm in a very direct way. So for me, those practices of slow breathing, strong breath holds, and really mobilizing the diaphragm very physically, very externally, for me, those get me out of my head. They really get me into my body. And I really feel that dramatic shift that I'm always talking to you guys about in my mental state, in my emotional state, and in my nervous system response. It's very obvious to me in those moments that something is changing, that something is shifting. So what else can we use? What other tools do we have access to? We can use sound, right? We can vocalize. So we can hum, we can sing, we can even scream if we want to. I wouldn't do it to excess to the point where you're hurting your throat, but screaming can really release a lot of energy, and it's definitely going to change your state a little bit. So we can use our own voice to move the breath, to move the energy, to even engage different muscles and different aspects of our nervous system in a different way. If you are musically oriented and you have a lot of instruments around, you can use drumming, you can use chimes or tuning forks. You can literally shift the sound waves in your immediate environment to change that environment. So I promise you that if you start to create different frequencies around you, it will make you feel completely differently. And for those of you who follow my tuning fork series, that's a lot of what we're doing, right? We're applying the tuning forks to our body, but that sound frequency is still coming into the ears, coming into the auditory processes. It's creating a change in the entire body systemically. And then what else can we do? You can actually combine drumming with movement, right? By tapping your body. You can start to hit and slap yourself in different ways, which sounds very funny. But what happens is you start drawing your attention, you start drawing your awareness, you start drawing your focus to all these different aspects of your being where you weren't focused before. So you're really forcing yourself to shift where your awareness is, where your focus is. And again, it gets you out of that state of being stuck in that past, stuck in the old stories, stuck in this state of despair. And then I think also another tool that we have is playing around with different elements and with different temperatures. So I know for me personally, water is super transformational. So water has this way of transporting me. I feel like I'm a totally different being when I'm in a bath, in a shower, in an ocean, in a lake, whatever it is. Water really is transformative. And then also playing around with different temperatures, with hot and cold. Can you bring yourself into a different state of awareness with these simple, totally free tools that we all have in our immediate environment? So I'm talking kind of fast and I'm just throwing a lot of random ideas out there. But I think the big takeaway is that we have so many tools at our fingertips at all times, and many of them, most of them, are completely free and fully accessible. We just have to have the presence of mind and even enough love for our own well-being in order to use them. And so I was really thinking about it earlier because I find this pattern happens so often with my clients, with myself. I see this all the time. Why do we have so much resistance to doing the very things that we know will make us feel so much better? Why do we love to indulge in the despair, in the depression, in the victimhood, in the really yucky feelings that we don't enjoy being in? And it's not a criticism to anybody else. I'm just as guilty of that. So this weekend, during my mini emotional breakdown, I had to really force myself to do all those things that I know to do, right? These are things I've been learning for decades. I know so many different tools. I have them readily available and at my fingertips and in the front of my brain. And I still had to force myself to do them. I still had to force myself in that moment of absolute misery to breathe, to move my body, to go for a walk. But what's interesting is even just a few minutes into any of those practices, I'm so acutely aware that everything has shifted for the better and that everything is going to continue to shift for the better. So I think if we can just have the presence of mind and again, enough love for ourselves to force ourselves just to do these simple, basic practices, once you begin, all the mechanisms shift, the states shift, the physiology shifts, and it makes it easier to keep going. And we start to feel so much better, so much more quickly. So guys, I don't know what the end tagline is here, but love yourselves enough to do these self-care practices, not just when things are going great and you already feel wonderful. I mean, it's nice to do them then too, but really forcing yourself to do these things when shit is actually getting challenging for you and when you actually need these things the most. So just to close today's video, I wanted to ask that if this vantage point or this type of video appeals to you or that you feel like you can engage with this type of content, it would be really nice for me to hear that. If you actually got any value out of this kind of more casual conversation, which is very different than my regular teaching style, or if you have your own self-care tools that you tend to pull out in those moments of absolute crisis, I would love to hear them. And I think it would be nice for the whole community to have those in the comments so we can really share and sort of feedback what's working for people, what's not, and maybe even enlighten people on an idea that none of us have ever thought of before. That's always where the benefit of sharing comes into play. So again, I would love to be able to make more videos like this more often to intersperse with my more formal tutorials that you guys are so accustomed to seeing every Tuesday and Friday. It gives me a little bit more variety to offer and also kind of simplifies the stress on my end in terms of my production schedule. So any feedback is more than welcome. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you next time.